How's it going, my friends? Welcome to 2024. I know it's already been like a few weeks or so, and this isn't even my first video of the year, but I do want to talk about something that's really going to be key for us going into 2024. Because there are a lot of different potential disaster scenarios that could happen, right? And we, as preparedness-minded people, we have to be able to evaluate which of those things is most likely to happen to us. Because we just have limited time and limited resources to be able to prepare for everything. Despite the fact that there are numerous calamities that could happen at basically any time. We see events in the news like earthquakes, tsunamis, wildfires, and civil unrest that are destroying communities. But what can we really do to avoid the consequences of these potential calamities? I mean, other than moving out of California. So now, looking forward into this new year, what are the disaster scenarios that we should be preparing for? Today, I want to cover the top 3 disaster scenarios that I think are most likely to affect our daily lives at some point in 2024. Let's start with the most likely. This is something we already see happening, but it could get significantly worse. And that is economic instability.
Federal Reserve is raising the
Fed
interest
is
rate
set to raise interest rates.
Highest inflation in 40 years.
With inflation as high as it is and our supply chains as fragile as they are, which we saw during COVID, how likely is it that economic hardship is going to affect our daily lives? For many, it already is. We've seen interest rates doubling in the last 3 years, and that's forced a lot of us to completely change our spending habits. Looking back at past recessions, it seems like we could be really close to a tipping point, and we have no idea how far we could fall. Could it just be that we have a bunch of foreclosures like in 2008? Just be, as if that was a small thing. Or could it be a full-blown depression like a lot of our grandparents faced? It's really easy to think that things could never be as bad as they were then, during the Depression when a quarter of people were unemployed and those who still had their jobs had a 50% wage reduction on average, and that's with rising prices. If that happened today, how long would you be able to afford your mortgage and groceries? The next disaster we should be preparing for is disruption to our supply chain caused by, say, a pandemic where the government shuts down imports and exports, or a cyber attack that takes out our transportation and delivery systems. In recent news, US officials are reporting that state-backed Chinese hackers have access to computer systems of about 24 critical entities just in the last year, saying that they're targeting critical infrastructure to disrupt communications should a conflict between the US and China arise. This critical infrastructure that's affected includes a Texas power grid, a Hawaii water system, and a West Coast port and pipeline. And as we've seen just recently, Texas's power grid and Hawaii's water supply are both really important. To me, it sounds like they're trying to do a lot more than just limit communications. And if there's one thing I've learned in recent years, it's
don't trust China. China is an asshole.
The third circumstance that I think is becoming more and more likely is mass civil unrest. 4 years ago, as we were going into our last presidential election, we saw civil unrest reach a point that I'm guessing none of us have ever seen within our lifetimes, at least not here in the US. We also saw politicians telling our civil servants to stand down and disregard their oath for political reasons.
How long do you think Seattle in those few blocks looks like this?
I don't know. We could have the summer of love.
Even referring to this carnage as the summer of love, all while police stations were burned down, city blocks were being turned into autonomous zones where gang leaders soon took control. We are living in a time where we cannot rely on our government to provide the protections that they've promised. Criminals aren't being held responsible, so their actions are becoming more barbaric and more frequent. Just look at the theft in these cities where they decriminalized petty theft. Criminals are becoming more organized and are willing to commit crimes more frequently because there's no penalty. So if you're in an area that is going through this or could go through this year, you're going to want to make sure that you have everything on hand. The last thing you want to do is go out into a riot looking for essentials. Now, we don't know whether the next disaster is going to be civil, economic, or environmental, but what I do know is that no matter what happens, you're going to need access to water and to food. You can bet that resources are going to quickly become scarce. And when's the best time to accumulate resources? Before a disaster strikes. Otherwise, you're going to be left bidding against other desperate families for the little bit that's left. If a disaster hit that caused a rush on the stores, would you rather be fighting your way through those stores, trying to gather up as much supplies as you can? Or would you rather be comfortably back at home, battening down the hatches? I know that I would much rather be at home where I can protect my family and communicate our plan. For that reason, our family has always kept several months of food storage on hand. We learn how to use our food storage and cycle through it so we can reduce spoilage. We also learn how to grow our own produce and store it for later use. But something we never did before was fine-tune our food storage to be exactly what we would need. Until now. We put together this whole plan and tool to help you know exactly how much of exactly what ingredients you're gonna need to be able to continue to make your family the meals that they already love. We're calling this food storage made of the meals your family loves. I know, it's a bit on the nose. But instead of just having staples around like sugar, flour, maybe some beans and rice, you can have the ingredients you need with just a little extra planning to be able to make foods that your family already loves to eat, like pizza and peach cobbler. If a disaster strikes, I need to be able to keep my head on straight so I can make the best decisions and be fully capable. I'm not the kind of guy that likes missing meals, so in the event of a disaster, I would hate to limit my judgment and become short-sighted, all because I'm hungry, forcing me to trade away valuable resources to feed my family. Instead, with just a little extra planning, we can keep eating like we did beforehand. So if you don't already have all of your food storage and a great plan in place, which if you do, that's fantastic, that's what we're all about here. But if you don't, I invite you to go check out what I've created. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video and I'll pin it in a comment below. Because I've kept it incredibly affordable, I just want to make sure I can get this information out to you. Now I'd love to hear from you. If you don't mind commenting below, what are your predictions? What's coming this year and maybe in the next couple of years that all of us should be really preparing for? That way all of us can help each other and be prepared together.